Now back to Tell Me Everything on Sirius XM Progress 127.
We are back, taking your calls at 866-997-4748, 866-997-GRIT. I am so pleased to welcome this next guest to the show. He is someone that I have admired for many years. I've had the great pleasure of being on a lot of podcasts with him. I've never had Pastor Doug Pagitt on the show before, but this guy is the real deal. I wish he would run for office. He is everything I pretend to be when I get asked to go on TV and talk about Scripture. Doug is an author, a pastor. He's a great activist. He is the founder and executive director of Vote Common Good, and he is one of the leading voices of intelligent, progressive Christianity in the United States. And he has been a long-time principled critic of the abomination and fraud of Christian nationalism. His new book is called Outdoing Jesus. It's out now, and this past weekend, Doug and the Vote Common Good team were serving as protective witnesses outside a Minneapolis church while ICE agents staked out the building, waiting to try to kidnap families arriving for Sunday services because Republicans have now made church unsafe. Doug was also at the peaceful vigil at the site where Alex Preddy was killed by federal agents, and Vote Common Good has now released an ICE rapid response action plan for churches nationwide. Pastor Doug Pagitt joins us now live from Minneapolis. Happy New Year, sir. It is so good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you, John. I really appreciate being here. Thanks for your interest in all of this and all the good causes you care so much about.
Thank you. I heard you say that Minneapolis feels like a war zone right now. For those of us watching from afar, what does it actually look like and feel like on the ground?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. This is home for me. So, these issues are really personal. Friends of mine are afraid, people that I care about. My own son, frankly, my own adult son, he's 34 years old. We adopted him into our family along with his brother, and they were of Mexican heritage and born in Minneapolis. He came over to our house to pick up his passport and his birth certificate because he was told by the Amazon dispatcher who he works for that people like him now need to carry their papers in Minneapolis. That is unthinkable. It's un-American. It's completely wrong. People I know have their children being targeted by ICE agents who are sitting outside their schools. We're standing with people who have family members that have been abused and beaten, and standing over the bloody spots on the ground, frozen ground here in Minneapolis, where 2 different people have been shot and killed in the last 10 days by ICE agents. It's dangerous because of ICE.
How does it compare, Doug, emotionally or civically to the days after the murder of George Floyd?
Yeah, that's really important to us here. For a lot of people, they might think back and think, yeah, that was, back in 2020, just at the start of COVID, and it feels like it's a long time ago. But truthfully, here in Minneapolis in the Twin Cities area, that's a memory that sits very close. Many of us drive by that intersection and we know that place. And it's like a death in your family where to outsiders, it feels like that was a long time ago. But to many people here, it feels like it's part of the current experience. So then back just in late August, there was a school shooting at a Catholic school. Children were killed. That sits heavy on many of our hearts. ICE agents now coming in. All of that in this community that's really tight-knit, small. I mean, Minneapolis is well known, but, it's a small community, and you can walk from the place, as I did just the other day and was in all 3 spots today, from where George Floyd was murdered, and then to where Renee Good was murdered, and then over to where Alex Preddy was murdered. The car didn't even warm up by the time I got from one place to the other. And it sits heavy, and I'll tell you the difference. In 2020, many of us were afraid that the authorities were surveilling us. I was out as a protester against the actions of the police. Now what's happening is citizens are having to surveil their federal government. There are teams through Signal apps and other communications who are communicating with each other where ICE is and what they're doing. And people are recording and people are changing the Ring cameras outside their homes to surveil their streets to keep an eye out for the threat that's coming to our communities. So it is sad and it is scary, and we're not afraid of each other here. We're not afraid of immigrants. There's a lot of things to be afraid of in this world. Immigrants are not on that list. for any
You're
of
talking
us.
to a guy who lives in New York and LA. I know exactly what you mean. They are some of the loveliest people in the world. But again, I haven't been watching Fox News for 25 years being fed propaganda and xenophobia to
That's
make
right.
me a horrified, evil person. I want to commend you because I think, like never before, maybe not since the civil rights movement, clergy showing up is going to
Yeah.
matter and move the needle more than anything. I mean, we just saw Pope Leo's, aide, Alex Tobin, came out and said that ICE has to be abolished. The Archdiocese of Newark. When I see you and the folks outside that church this weekend while ICE is trying to
Yeah.
literally kidnap people who are coming to church, it's so important for faith leaders to be physically present. And I want to ask you, for those who aren't in the church community, or those who are Catholics, and what does it mean to be a protective witness? What does that phrase mean, and,
Yeah.
and why does authoritarianism fear witnesses so much?
One of the things we've seen with ICE is we know how afraid they are to have someone turn their camera on to point it at them. We know they're so afraid they want to wear masks so people don't know who they are. They are afraid to be seen, to be recorded, and to be found out. Every other civil servant I know is proud of their work. They wish people would come and film the good work that they do in civil work, in civil service. They want people to know about it because they're proud of it, not ICE. ICE are the only people in our governments that are ashamed of what they do and don't want people watching them. So many eyes is the solution to this. In fact, we're asking
Yes.
people to come to Minneapolis and put eyes on ICE on every street corner in Minneapolis. So back to the clergy. I stood with a number of clergy on Sunday morning outside of a church to make it safe for people to come to church, not to help them cross a busy road, not for them to worry about slipping on a sidewalk in -4-degree temperature, to be sure that they would feel confident pulling up in their car because ICE has surveilled that church. ICE has sat outside of it, waiting for people to walk out and picking the brown skinned people and arresting them,
That's it, man.
harassing them, and following them. The fact that in America, ICE is interfering with the free practice of religion from this
Mm-hmm.
administration that wants to lecture the rest of us about how important it is that Christianity be free to be practiced in America. There are Hispanic churches here in Minneapolis that have had attendance of 600 people for years. They're down to dozens because people
Yeah,
won't leave their houses to go outside. So many of the good people of this area and around the country are finding food and bringing it to them and bringing
that's right.
doctors to their houses and bringing them food. We're having to shelter in place,
Yep.
shelter in place
But so many
because
good people. I
ICE
mean,
is dangerous to people.
my heart is so filled watching all this multiracial coalition of so many different people in Minnesota who are all coming together for the least of these. I saw something kind of like that in Chicago last summer when they were besieged. And here's what I want to ask, because this protest at the church last weekend in St. Paul was, I thought,
Yeah.
exactly the kind of table flipping that the gospel commands if one follows the Jesus of the gospel rather than fights for right wing Christian power. I want to phrase this right, Doug. For any churches out there, what moral responsibilities do the churches have when they know their buildings become targets or traps?
Yeah, look, the pastors are having to say to their people, in order for you to be safe, don't come to church.
Yeah,
So all the people at the church that the protesters went to, they may have an argument that their one church service was disrupted. I can tell you of hundreds of churches in this state that have been disrupted for weeks upon weeks. Now, here's also just the blunt truth. ICE has been operating in the United States since its inception in 2003. Now, by the way,
mm,
ICE isn't that old. It's not like we've always had ICE. What would
correct,
we do without it? It's been a
correct.
23-year experiment that hasn't worked. It's time for us to reconsider ICE completely from top to bottom. But the the people of ICE are now creating the context in which people can't attend their churches. And I'm not even talking about people who are in the country without legal status. We do a lot of work around immigration. I did a whole bike ride across the entire U.S.-Mexico border and across the coast. I rode 3,000
I
miles on
remember
my
that.
bicycle with a documentary team because we want to get close to the border. We care deeply about it. We have an immigration system that makes it impossible for most people to have legal status in the United States if they want it. But the people I'm talking about who are afraid to leave, they're the people who were born in Minnesota. They're people who've lived here with legal status for decades. I stood outside of an apartment complex right across from the church, and a man came out and he said, "Thank you for walking our streets. Thanks for the clergy being out here. Because everyone living in this apartment complex, we all have legal status, and none of us feel safe to leave."
Amazing.
Anyone
Yeah.
explain how it's possible that someone would say, well, that's the price we pay to what? Get the worst of the worst. John, look, I don't know how you pursue the worst of the worst, but here's what I do know. You don't announce that you're coming and think they're going to wait for you.
Yeah, it's
It's
all fear.
so absurd. You don't think the worst of the worst would have just gone south on Interstate 35 and gone to Iowa or Kansas or Dallas? What, you think the worst of the worst are going to wait around for ICE to show up? And you know what else the worst of the worst aren't going to do? Let you break their window and then just give up. If you're
Yeah.
going after
Oh,
the
yeah.
hardcore, the people they're terrorizing, sorry to be preachy here, but the people they are terrorizing are
That's why I
people
asked you.
like my own son, born in
Yeah.
this state. As Minnesotan and American as I am, has to carry papers, be afraid, and have his other family members tell him, comply so you don't die.
And that's
It is
authoritarianism. Yeah.
shameful.
The same
That
people
is
who voted for a
authoritarianism.
people who voted for a convicted felon who had to pay 26 million for stealing from Americans with a fraud online university, adjudicated rapist. They voted for him, and the illegals need
Yes.
to enforce and follow our laws. I mean, like, this is not about immigration. And I've said many times, if they cared
Yes.
about border crossings, the majority of undocumented, as you know, Pastor, are here because they overstayed their visas. But you don't see the
Yes.
thousands and thousands of undocumented Irish or Russians being thrown into Alligator Alcatraz. They could go after the employers, the people like Trump who put that help wanted sign at our border, and start arresting them. Border crossings will stop. They won't do it. They don't want to stop the border crossings. They want this authoritarian power. They want
Yes.
the spectacle. And now we see smearing victims, justifying murder. What do you say to American Christians, okay, watching Fox News, who are being told, what do you say to American Christians who are saying that certain lives are acceptable losses? The whole notion on Renee Good was, well, it's a tragedy she's dead, but she was also a terrorist, so it's really good that she's dead. What do you say to these revoltingly false Christians?
I was literally hearing the story of a person who was in Afghanistan as an Army Ranger. And he said that even in Afghanistan, they couldn't shoot into a car window of an unarmed person. The rules of war meant they had to shoot the engine, not the driver. So literally these people who say things like it's acceptable losses, it would be a war crime to do what these ICE officers have done in a place where we're in a war situation. It is such utter nonsense that an American citizen can be killed on the street by a masked federal agent, and we call it the price of doing business. It is immoral. It is wrong. You cannot stand up in a church and worship the crucified Jesus and then say, well, it's the cost of doing business.
Or Romans 13, Doug. They'll quote Romans, obey the governing authorities. Not, they don't say that when a Democrat's in office. They don't say obey the governing authorities when it's a Democratic president. But they'll go to Paul to get around woke Jesus and his welcome to stranger nonsense. They will.
Yeah, yeah. Look, there is no doubt. But even the Apostle Paul would say to them, there is a moral law. And look, if you want to follow
Right.
the law as Romans calls us to do, which I am proud to do, and I'd spend time with anybody in the book of Romans, the the law was broken by ICE agents. That's
Yeah.
once you release
Yeah.
the body cam footage, once you put a jury in the jury box, you know who didn't follow the law? The
Correct.
ICE agent. Do you know who
That was
doesn't
the
get to
truth, Renee
make up the
Good.
law on the street? An ICE agent. And we say to ICE agents every night, look, if you need to go get a personal loan to pay back your $50,000 signing bonus, please do. Because your conscience is calling you to not get in that vehicle tomorrow. We keep talking in this country about a national strike. Maybe we need a national strike. Do you know who needs to step up and strike? ICE agents.
Correct.
Why
Correct.
don't all the good ones, say, we're not coming to work tomorrow? Fix the problem. There are so many solutions in the good hands. The fact that the rest of us have to hustle around and figure out how to protect ourselves from ICE while all the supposed good ICE agents say that's not all of us. We don't all do that. A lot of us are doing really good, important work. You know what you should
Yeah,
do? Call a national strike on all your ICE agents until ICE gets this figured out.
it's true. It's true. If you
Do a
were a good
work
one, that's what you
slowdown.
do.
That's
Except
what
they
you
know
would
they
do.
work for fascists and they know they'd be fired if they ever took action against it because they don't work for a company or for an organization that supports free speech or even critical thinking. And
Well,
I
the
got
great
to
thing about
ask,
being a federal employee is you have federal employee protections. So, if you're
true,
gonna
well,
live on the federal dole, then you might as well use all the leverage that you have as a federal
yeah,
employee.
we've seen how seriously these guys take federal jobs, though, as you well
Yeah,
know.
we sure do.
Um,
We
I got
sure
to
do.
praise you even more because Vote Common Good has put out this ICE Rapid Response Action Plan for churches. And I love that you did this. Thank you. I love that we're seeing churches and priests and pastors and nuns being famous for the Jesus stuff rather than
Yeah.
lecturing people about their sex lives or even worse. What are the most important things congregations should be doing right now?
Yeah. Look, it's not hard to be on the moral side of this issue, and churches need to do it. And number one is churches need to have some internal conversations about where they're going to stand on this issue. We put out that action call back in the summer. We saw it coming. We knew that churches were going to have to organize. And we knew that for many people who are targeted by this administration, they are also people who are comfortable and find their community inside of churches.
Sure. Yeah.
So we knew that churches needed to be the place. And we know that churches, for all their faults, and I've been a working pastor for my entire adult life, were full of faults. They're also a uniquely organized group of people in a local setting, meeting every week, pooling their money together and acting in the world. And when you ask those communities, what will you do? Then they can clarify and they can start to announce. So we say to them, look, you've got 3 steps. You've got to talk to each other. Then you have to clarify the level of work you're going to do, and then you can start to act. And in the toolkit that we have at votecommongood.com, people can go there and download it. It walks you through what the laws are and what you can do, how you can stand with immigrants, how you can show up at court with them, how you can stand on the street with people. And it calls you into action. And I will tell you, some of the things we suggest people do, we now see have deadly consequences when you have rogue ICE agents with masks on
Yeah.
and jumping people and shooting them in the back. So it
Yeah.
is dangerous work. I'm not saying it's easy to be moral, but I am saying for so many churches and so many pastors, this is your time to say something. And for church leaders who think they can also stay quiet on all of this, if you continue to say the things happening in our country and not naming the fact that certain individuals are being targeted by our federal government, I think you are missing your chance to proclaim the gospel. One of the things I've learned so much about the Jesus story and following the gospels is it's very first name basis. Just think about all the names that you know of the people. People know the names of
Sure.
the disciples. They know the names of Nicodemus and Zacchaeus. And we
Yeah.
know these names. You know why? Because it's personal. So when pastors stand up and speak in generalities rather than in specifics, you're denying the gospel. Name the situation and name your congregation and what you can do. And you are not alone. Actually, many congregations through many periods of anti-immigrant sentiment in this country have known how to organize. Here's the sad reality, John. America has a full history of this level of cruelty. We've done it to the
Yeah.
indigenous people. We've done it to the
Hmm.
Japanese. We've done it to the Irish. We've done it to the Chinese. I mean, in my lifetime, we stopped the Chinese Exclusion Act. Chinese
That's right.
couldn't become American citizens. Just imagine that. Like, and churches and communities of faith across the religious spectrum have always been at the forefront of this work. And
From
this is the
abolition to
time as
civil
well.
rights. Yep, from abolition to civil rights. So let me, before I let you go, and I'm so grateful you came here, and I hope you'll join us again. But there's something that you've been one of the most articulate voices against Christian nationalism for a long time and against authoritarianism, and I've heard you talk about not becoming too angry at this or not becoming too lonely. And
Yeah.
before we hit the break, I just want to ask, why are isolation and despair such useful, powerful tools for authoritarians?
Yeah. You know, I heard somebody tell me that in the AA world that they were in, they used the word HALT as an acronym. And it was, don't become too hungry, don't become too angry, don't become too lonely, and don't become too tired. And what authoritarian movements want to do is make people feel like they are alone. They want them to be angry, and they want them to give up. So the care that we have to do for ourselves across the board is be sure that we're not so hungry. And I'll tell you, you know what's great? At all these places I've been out on the streets here in Minneapolis, all the protests and the vigils and the walking and the confronting, there's people out there with food. There's people setting up food tables and coffee, and now you have the National Guard giving food to protesters. That is a sign that is different. Because some people really do get too hungry. People do get too angry. So many of us feel so lonely in this. You just lay in your bed at night and you think, oh my God, what could we do? And we don't know what to do. So then we just get tired and we don't do anything. So I don't know, maybe people want to come to Minneapolis and stand on a street corner. Maybe they want to come and help. Look, there's nobody organizing here because everybody's organizing here, right? This is everybody's doing it. So if you come, or if you know someone, or you have friends, or you have family, you've been here before, you came to the Super Bowl, or you came to a political rally, or you came to something in Minnesota, come again and stand on the street corner and let people know that you're here. Because loneliness and anger, that just breeds failure. So let that anger turn into action. Because we all know that anger at its core is misplaced disappointment. And so the way we get over our disappointment is to engage with other people and to do some kind of good. And look, I know a lot of people, they give money, they give money to us, they give money to other groups. It's so crucial and it's so important. And if it makes you feel connected, please do. But also if coming makes you feel connected, or calling someone who lives in Minneapolis, or sending a text, or now we're talking about in Portland, Maine, because now, Bovino left here today with his Nazi jacket on and is heading up to Maine. So it's going to be another city, and it's going to be another town, and it's going to be another region, and it's going to keep happening. And we have 3 long years to battle against a completely authoritarian administration. And we cannot allow ourselves to become overly hungry, angry, lonely, and tired.
Amen. Pastor Doug Pagitt is Executive Director of Vote Common Good. Go to votecommongood.com. His new book is out, Doing Jesus, available now. Pastor Pagitt, thank you so much. Please come back again.
You are.
Quick break. We'll be right back with your calls. This is Progress.